you permission. Cool. Were you able to record? I didn't.
Yeah, sorry, I thought it made the little noise, but yeah, we're all good.
Okay, cool. Sweet, thank you. All right, so thank you everybody for coming tonight to our meeting number 9. Wow, so 9 meetings in, and thank you for holding on and just being with us. So we can move to the next slide. So I'll quickly cover the agenda and just introduce a couple folks from city staff that we have here with us tonight. So we'll quickly just do and some introductions, some focus topic overview. I think we got the same presentation for that last week, so we could quickly go over that. And then really quickly go over some of the key issues and opportunities associated with this focus topic of what we've heard, the issues, opportunities that you guys have seen and discussed in the past for about 15 minutes. Then we'll really just dive into the small group discussions. We'll get you guys talking with each other and to be able to strategize on ideas about affordable housing and wealth building in the neighborhood. So we'll do that for 45 minutes, break out in and have a break for 5 minutes, and then come together as a larger group to really report out and just talk about what you talked about with each other. And then we'll talk about next steps moving forward. But before we kind of go into the logistics of the meeting, I did want to introduce a couple folks that are here with us. We have a city staff from Host and from Nest, Andrew Johnston and Elvis Rubio. I don't know if you guys want to just quickly just introduce yourself and just wave to the camera and wave to everyone in the committee, but they'll be here as a resource to answer any questions that might come up and yeah, provide kind of any feedback as
needed. Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Johnston, and I'm with the Department of Housing Stability, and here to answer any questions and help out with the conversation regarding affordable housing.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm Elvis Rubio. I'm the Deputy Director for Neighborhood Equity and Stabilization. And likewise as Andrew, I will be here to answer any questions you have around community wealth building or anything else. So I'm here as a resource. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And just wanted to thank the steering committee members for reviewing the power presentation slides in advance, and even those that were able to follow with additional questions and requests for materials. I encourage everyone to continue to do that. You know, since we do provide the materials in advance, it does give us an opportunity to either adapt or correct things in the presentation or prepare additional materials in advance. So next slide. So we should all notice by now for just key Zoom logistics about muting when you're not talking, keeping the video on, especially during the small group discussion. So it feels like we're really sitting around the table together. And then if anyone has technical issues, please send Amanda a chat and she will be able to help troubleshoot those things. And if we have any public members from the public tonight, feel free to send your chats or send your questions via chat, and we can try to get to those at the end and answer some of them. And again, just a reminder that the meeting is being recorded. So yeah, I see Corrine Roberts. Feel free to just drop in any questions in the chat, but the meeting discussion will be for just the steering committee members only. All right, next slide. Ground rules. You know, I appreciate everyone really following these rules and continue to just be involved and respectful of one another. So obviously, I don't need to go through all of this, but just to be respectful and to be able to have just encourage an environment where people feel free to disagree and agree with one another and give each other the time to express their concerns and thoughts as well. So. And again, just a reminder of where we are in the process of phase 2. Coming out of phase 1, we really took the time to understand the area, listen to the concerns, and we're now narrowing on the key issues and just diving into the conversations about how we start thinking about recommendations for the plan. And then I'll pass it off to, who's next here?
Sung, you're passing it to Brad.
All right, Brad.
So thanks, Sung, appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're going to talk about affordable housing and wealth building, and this is part 2 of our odyssey through focus topics that are influencing the neighborhood plan. Next slide, please. So the different focus topics, you'll remember this graphic from last time. The focus topics relate to the 4 sections of the plan. I think it's important to note that this section on economy and housing, last year with the passage of the East and East Central plans, that's the first time that neighborhood planning has routinely addressed these issues, which might be kind of shocking to folks because these are the top issues in the city right now. But the East and East Central plans were the first ones with a chapter devoted to it. So I think the good news there is we can build on that groundwork, and we've learned a lot. The market has changed and it continues to change just even in the year since those plans have come to form. So affordable housing, wealth building really covers 2 topics, covers land use build form and also economy and housing. Next slide, please. So the big questions tonight when we get into our groups, and we'll have several questions for discussion, but the big questions on affordable housing: what policies and programs can be implemented to keep existing renters and owners in the neighborhood? We're suggesting we focus most, not all, but most of our time tonight on affordable housing, on how to keep the affordable housing that we have. It's pretty clear citywide and certainly in these neighborhoods that this is something that we're not going to build ourselves out of this crisis. And retaining housing is going to be critical moving forward. So there is a bit of an emphasis tonight on ways we can, again, retain and keep folks who want to stay in the neighborhood. And then that's related to community wealth building as well. Key question there is what resources can be provided to help residents access different wealth building tools and benefit from their longevity in the neighborhood and their connection to the neighborhood. Next slide, please. So over the next few minutes, we're not going to take more than 7 or 8 minutes. We're going to provide you some background, some data, some of which was sent in advance, some which has been added. In particular, shout out, I don't know if Nola has joined us yet, but Nola sent us some follow-up questions. We have some additional data, Nola, that you brought to our attention, so we appreciate it. And we have some folks on the screen. Another benefit of North Northwest is we've got some folks on the screen who this is a big part of their lives. They're not only residents of your neighborhoods, but their vocations are also related to affordable housing as well. So we should have a very robust discussion tonight. So this issue has been top of mind in the neighborhoods. You all know this, and what we heard in the first phase of outreach, a lot of housing and affordability and gentrification issues just popped up throughout. So this relates to density, and density, while there's been a lot of new development, and Arlene will show you this in a moment, it hasn't made the neighborhoods more affordable in terms of the new development. The diversity of housing types, we've seen more at the high end, not so much in the middle and the low end. And then also we've seen the evaporation of cultural heritage in these neighborhoods, which is a top concern of a lot of folks we talked to in the first phase. We heard a lot of good ideas. Chaffey Park has been a leader with accessory dwelling units with a neighborhood-wide rezoning. That's an idea that could be applied to other neighborhoods in this part of town. And then a variety of affordable options and ideas. In a few minutes, we'll talk about some of the key ideas that have surfaced in the North Northwest neighborhoods and also in other parts of the city. And then, of course, dislikes from all of this, gentrification, the older in-place affordable housing being lost, the loss of families, and you'll see a sharp departure in demographics over the last 20 years in these neighborhoods. And again, the new development not answering the affordability issue, new development largely being high end and with higher price points. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Arlene, who's going to focus on some key data points. I do want to warn that the data is sort of endless in this area, so we tried to refine it to tell a pretty concise story of North Northwest. Arlene?
Hi, everybody. Arlene Taniwaki. So next slide. And so you all have seen some of these slides before. They're from the issues and opportunities discussion. but it's just a good reminder to take a look at them again. This particular slide shows the high housing costs and what's happened over the last 20 years or so. Not a surprise. The chart on the left shows median home value change from 2000 to 2019. Pretty sharp increase, particularly between 2010 and 2019. And then on the right, it shows median rent change, same time period. And again, you know, an overall big increase, particularly in the Highland neighborhood. Next slide. And so as Brad has mentioned, there has been a loss of affordability. I think it's very obvious to all of us. So there has been a substantial amount of new development, yet at the same time, what you've seen happening, and you all have seen this, is you've seen the smaller, less expensive, older homes being replaced by more units, but they tend to be, you know, just higher end and more expensive. And that's happened across the entire neighborhood area. Next slide. And so today, you know, while the density has increased, there are more units overall, the population has declined. And that was an interesting statistic that we saw when we looked at 2000 compared to 2019. The average household size in 2000 was 2.9 persons per household. Now it's 2.1. And as we've discussed before, a lot of it is Latinx families. They've moved out, with higher income singles and couples moving in. Next slide. And so, as I mentioned, we've seen a pretty significant displacement of the Latinx population, along with the loss of culture. And so the bars in red are 2000, the Hispanic and Latinx proportion of the population, which was anywhere from 65% to 82% of the population in the respective neighborhoods during that time. And that's decreased quite dramatically. Now it's 25% to about 50% of the total neighborhood population. And then the map on the right shows the areas still vulnerable to displacement, including Chaffey Park, as well as parts of Sunnyside. Next slide. Okay, so this is it's a new map. And actually, if you Google the Denver Neighborhood Equity and Historic Redlining Map, it comes up. It's from the Department of Public Health and Environment. And essentially, it's a clip from the entire city of Denver. But essentially what it does, it takes a look at the highest inequity areas from a health equity perspective. So essentially that's poverty, education, park and food access, medical care, childhood obesity, mortality, a whole bunch of different health related indicators. And then it sort of looks at it against historic redlining maps. So essentially the darker pink background shows areas with the highest inequity. And in this particular map, it's parts of the Sunnyside neighborhood. And then that's overlaid with historic redlined areas in the city of Denver, and those are shown in stripes. So it does indicate that we have neighborhoods, particularly just all across the board here, that experience the highest inequity and in the city overall. Next slide. I think I turned it to Ben.
Yeah, I'll take it from here. Thanks. Thanks, Arlene. My name is Ben Kelly, and I'm going to talk just in two brief slides here about some of the policy and the program efforts that the city's undertaken in the last couple years into today, addressing affordable housing challenges that have been in place for decades in Denver. We have a 5-year strategic housing plan that started to be developed in 2020 and was adopted just last November. So the benefit of this Near Northwest plan is to be able to use that as a resource in thinking about housing solutions and housing strategies for these neighborhoods, building on the Near Northwest or the 5-year strategic plan, which covers a very expansive set of housing needs in the city, everything from reducing homelessness and reducing eviction, the threats of eviction and increasing home ownership. So it's a very expansive policy document, but that is, I think, a resource for the Near Northwest Plan. And also in 2016, Denver created a dedicated affordable housing fund, which is funded through a property tax that is dedicated to this fund, and also development fees from residential and commercial development. There are funds from those developments that are directed into this fund the city manages. And I think really the guiding principles of that fund and the strategic plan are to really connect communities that are at the risk of displacement with housing resources, focusing resources on members of our community that are in crisis and in dealing with the shelter challenges and short-term, transitioning into permanent housing, which has been really amplified and intensified over the last couple of years during the pandemic. And then always seeking, strategies and tactics to create more affordable housing and also preserve the affordable housing that we have. I think I saw in the briefing book that about 5% of the housing inventory in the Near Northwest neighborhoods are dedicated affordable. So how do we expand and increase that percentage? And also connecting members of our community with housing, and that is everything from rental assistance to home ownership opportunities, and across a pretty broad spectrum of household incomes. So next slide, please. And then also a very active conversation in the city right now, it's been going on for more than a year, is what's called the Expanding Housing Affordability Initiative. And this is a policy tool that will likely go to city council later this spring that does really three things. It requires the inclusion of affordable housing on larger new residential developments throughout the city. Alongside that requirement on commercial and residential development, there's a linkage fee. There's a fee per square foot. It's calculated a number of different ways, but those funds from that development go into the city's dedicated affordable housing fund to be used as a resource for future affordable housing programs. And then alongside the requirement and the linkage fee is incentives to offset the cost of the deeper affordability in new projects. And that's everything from reducing parking requirements that are in the code to incentives for increased height in appropriate places, and also reduced permitting fees. So just trying to create some tools to offset and balance the affordability requirements in the policy. So there are other very active conversations in the city about affordable housing, but those are, I think, between the plan, the strategic plan, and the Expanding Housing Affordability Initiative, those are two that we really wanted to touch on in our introductory overview right now. So I think I hand it back to Brad.
I think there might be a question real quick from Leslie if we want to do that now.
Yeah, let's go to the next slide, and we will take a pause here because we threw a lot of information at you folks. So I think we've got time to take 2 or 3 questions before we set you up for the breakup groups. There was a question in the chat, by the way, that was answered in the chat that Ben had asked on the new inclusionary policy. You said larger units. What's larger? And it's 10 units or more is what the break is there.
And that applies for both rental and for sale. So
great.
Both of those segments.
Leslie, have at it. You got your hand up.
Hi, thank you. And Brad and Arlene and all, thank you. This is all very helpful. My question is that for the money that has already been raised through linkage fees and into the Affordable Housing Fund, how much of that, if any, has been spent to build affordable housing or subsidize that in this Near Northwest area plan boundary?
I suspect we don't have that answer, but Andrew, that sounds like a stump the guest from host question for you.
Oh, Leslie, great question. Well, first of all, I don't have the answer for just this area. But I can tell you that the Affordable Housing Fund, all those linkage fee dollars that are collected do have to go to creating units or affordable housing across the city. In particular, I want to make it the difference here is that it's not for services. So it is actually for creating housing.
I guess as a follow-up, Andrew, is that something that would be easy for you guys to figure out, is how much of the Affordable Housing Fund has been spent in these neighborhoods, or is that
I think there's only one project, so it'd probably be Zia on 41st and Inca that had, it was back under my predecessor, Councilman Espinosa, but the city helped purchase the property, which with that purchase, they had to have certain affordable units. They had a development agreement on for rent, and then they were supposed to build for sale. But with COVID and all of the complications that came with COVID, they actually had to come back to the city and redo their development agreement and request for a different one. And now they have a certain amount of for rent properties. So it's the Zia. And other than that, within the boundary area of Chaffey Park, Sunnyside, Highland, and Jefferson Park, to be honest, I think that might be the only one. The only other one that we haven't used the fund for, but that we got that got money into the fund, is the sale of the parking lot off of like 16th and Platte. It's across the street from my office. The city did sell that lot, and all of that money was negotiated to put back into the fund. But we don't have very many projects in Northwest Denver that actually have had financing from the city to help build them, because we're not a nest neighborhood. But I could be wrong, but I think I'm pretty accurate on that one.
Councilwoman Nola asked about ARIA, whether they had and I don't know if we know the answer, whether they had gotten subsidy. They may have predated the Affordable Housing Fund, but I don't know.
I think they predated the Affordable Housing Fund. I do know that ARIA has partnered with Habitat for Humanity to get theirs, but I think that theirs it's all that co-housing. And so I think it actually predated the fund, but that might be ARIA, but I don't know, but we could ask Sue Powers.
Not to create a problem for our friends at host, but it's possible these neighborhoods have actually contributed more to the fund than what you've taken out. So
it's interesting, and I'll see if I can run a report and get an answer back.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you. Renee, do you want to go ahead and just ask your question there that's in the chat?
Oh, I was wondering, and I'm kind of embarrassed, I don't remember the name of it, but DHA's project there right by Tijon. Fishon. Yeah.
Was
may have gotten some funds, but I'm not positive.
So that was part of the what was that? It wasn't the public-private partnership, but it was the bond project.
The bond, yeah.
So I think it was part of that bond project where we had that, we had it called out. So I think the bond project was different from the Affordable Housing Fund, but it was listed, Renee, in that ordinance that came through with DHA of being the facilitator for some of that. So that could be another one.
And Renee, while you're on the screen, there was some chatter in advance of this meeting about the Quig community that is a DHA community, which I believe is the largest DHA community in Denver. Can you just state real quick what sort of the dynamics are there, just in terms of number of households, and just a couple quick statistics about Quig?
Yeah, so Quig is our largest property. And well, I think it's like, I don't have the statistics in front of me, and I've been looking at numbers all day. I'll get that correct number. 330 is what I'm thinking, but I was looking at another site today. And we had done some initial exploration in a ULI tap to kind of quantify, just the potential of such a large area redevelopment, the order of magnitude that we could accomplish a lot of things. And that was done several years ago. We have not raised funds for the planning of the master planning of that site yet. And, it's just because we're building so much housing. We're working with the city to try and meet 1,200 units in 5 years. And we have a lot in process throughout the city and at Sun Valley, and did master planning for Westridge first. So we're happy that this project is going forward and that we can be a participant in the neighborhood planning and down the road look at raising funds for master planning and then ultimately competing for some implementation dollars down the road for the redevelopment of that site. So that's no secret at all. The community at the time that we talked to them said we'd like to see this redeveloped down the road, keeping residents in place and replacing all of the affordable housing that's there, but adding to the density that's there right now.
So again, keep that in mind in your groups that it's interesting because you've got one of the largest, DHA properties in Denver, right in Sunnyside. And at least in the term of this plan, this is a 20-year plan, there will be change there. Tripti, yeah, maybe this is a final question before we break you up into groups.
And actually, Emily had asked a question about a project at 49th and Zuni. I can answer that really quickly, Emily. The expanding affordability initiative policy will go to council this summer. So anything that's already under construction, like that project at 49th and Zuni, would not fall under that policy. So none of those units would be required to be affordable just because of the timing.
Tripti, a final question, and we'll go into our breakout groups in a moment. We also have some polls for you here in a minute. So it's a full steering committee experience tonight.
Yeah,
Tripti?
thank you. Yeah, thanks. The question I have on the QUIG being the largest, are we talking about the land mass property being the largest or the number of units being the largest?
I think it's both, Tripti, and it's 27.5 acres. And I was low in my guess. It's 380 public housing units.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. So in a moment here, we're going to be dividing you into 3 groups, and we've got some prompts as we usually do, but we're hoping that these different groups that you all can brainstorm on ways to preserve affordable housing, to create affordable housing, and also think about wealth building. And we've got some ideas here on the next 2 slides just to get you thinking about the kind of stuff that we're thinking about. So next slide, please. So the first one, this is not a end all be all, but the team thought, well, what are 4 or 5 policies that might really make sense for these neighborhoods if we wanted to expand affordable housing availability? The first one, which was considered in the East Area Plan, is what's called a no net loss policy. It essentially establishes a policy for your planning area that will have goals that if new housing is built, that the number of affordable housing units that exists will not decrease. So while we may build new housing, we're going to maintain the number of affordable units in the neighborhoods. Affordable units should not be lost to new development. That's sort of the bottom line of that policy, no net loss policy. Rent subsidies, the notion of increasing vouchers for tenants or payments to landlords to help people stay where they are, even if rents increase. Third one on here, incentives for landlords to limit rent escalations. What this exactly is yet to be yet to be formed, but there could be direct subsidies for landlords, or the other side of a rent subsidy to incent a landlord, or there could be other things in terms of perhaps land use policies that would be attractive to a landlord to limit rent escalations. And then lastly, importantly, and I believe the city's already working on this, and this may be our friends from Nest who are working on this, but a prioritization policy that formerly displaced residents or those at risk of displacement are given priority to any new affordable housing that's built in a neighborhood. So again, not only keeping folks we have, but also bringing back folks we've lost if they want to come back to the neighborhood. So again, this is not an end all be all, but this is a sample of the types of policies we want to brainstorm in these small groups. And just to give you get you thinking about these, we actually have a poll on this. So Amanda, I believe we can bring up the poll. Poll number 1. So affordable housing tools. We want you to select 2 of these different tools that are on this slide. What resonate with you that would be really interesting for your neighborhoods, or you think would fit well within your neighborhoods? The no net loss policy, so that with new development, we don't lose the number of affordable units. Rent subsidies to tenants. On the other side of that, incentives to landlords to preserve affordability, or this prioritization policy, or really none of the above. You've got some other ideas. So we want you to pick 2 of those, and let's just see where you are. So go ahead, if you could take maybe 45 seconds and start filling out the poll. Pick 2. Which of these might work best in North Northwest? Amanda, you got some action on that poll?
Yeah, responses are coming in. It looks like we've got over half, so maybe just a few more seconds here and then we can share the results.
Okay, the Jeopardy music is toning out now. All right, let's see the results. Interesting. Wow, interesting. These polls are fun, actually. So the no net loss policy and the prioritization policy resonates most with this group, as opposed to these subsidies or incentives on rents.
I don't think we can see the results, Brad.
Oh, Amanda, can you publish those so that
I can
everybody
see 'em.
Can you?
Yeah, I can.
can?
It says it's sharing. Can anyone else not see the poll there?
I can see them. Check if you have 2 screens up, it may have popped up on your opposite screen.
I say I'm viewing Ryan Anderson's screen.
Yeah, it does. Well, I'll tell you what, and that's Councilwoman, right, who's chiming in. You can't see him.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let's make sure we get a screenshot of this so we can share it with CD1. The no net less policy and the prioritization policies both scored 76% with this group. The subsidies and incentives, rent subsidies were 29%. Incentives for landlords, 24%. None of the above, 6%. So again, a real preference from this group on the no net loss policy, the prioritization policy. And what I'm reading between the lines here is this group is suggesting that broad-based policies could perhaps have a greater impact than subsidizing individual units. All right, we'll be discussing these polls in the group. So let's move on to the next slide, the last poll, and then we'll move you into your groups. So these are some ideas the team came up with in terms of wealth building and retention of home ownership. So there are 4 ideas here. Community land trusts, and this is when a community-based nonprofit owns the land, and then low and moderate income households own or rent the homes on there. I believe we have a resident expert. I believe NOLA has established or has been a part of a group that's established one of these in Swansea area. And there's some great examples. Our company, Puma, is currently researching best practices on this throughout the country. There are actually some pretty interesting success stories with community land trusts. Accessory dwelling units is a second idea. Again, Chaffey Park did a neighborhood rezoning so that folks could create a second unit on their lot. So whether that's, you know, the mother-in-law unit that's over the garage, or that's just an attached unit to your house, there are a whole variety of ways to do accessory dwelling units. Third one here is taking better advantage or beefing up home rehabilitation and renovation tools. So these are grants and low interest loans for home repairs. Interestingly, Dura manages probably the city's most at least long-lasting home rehab program. And then here's another one that I believe our friends at Nest are working on is down payment assistance for those who qualify, and really targeting folks who have been displaced or are threatened with displacement from neighborhoods. So it's more of a targeted program on down payment assistance. So similar deal, let's put up a poll. And I believe, again, we're going to ask you to pick two of these that you think might fit your neighborhood best. Community land trust, accessory.
Community land trust can be commercial as well, which I think is important around the wealth building aspects of our conversation tonight.
So for retaining like small businesses, legacy businesses, that type of thing.
Right. For
Yep.
community desired commercial uses.
And Brad, this is Councilman Sandoval. Have we done an land assessment? I think that these 4 areas, I want to go as far as to say 3/4 of the areas allow accessory dwelling units out of the whole entire study area. So it'd only be like really small pockets of areas that don't allow ADUs, like super small. I think like a lot of Sunnyside has it, except for a really tiny pocket, a lot of area in Highland and most of Jefferson Park.
I believe you're right. I believe we have that in the briefing book. And Councilwoman, this study area probably has the highest concentration of ADUs that could be built today of any part of the city. But, you know, do we want to go from 75% to 100% maybe is the question there on that second option. So community land trust, more ADUs, more aggressive use of home rehab renovation tools. And again, down payment assistance really targeted toward folks at risk of displacement or have been displaced. Amanda, do we have sufficient replies?
Yeah, we're almost to about 3/4. So if anyone wants their last chance, go ahead and I'll stop the poll and we can share the results.
Well, let's remember about 1/4 of us are exempt from voting. So
Yeah, no, I'm just, oh, it looks like we are good. So I will end it and share it here.
wow. I love this. All right, so for this group, Councilwoman, can you see the results or no?
Yes, it popped up.
Yay, there we go. Great. So community land trust, 88%. It's a mandate. Let's get one of these going over here. Also more ambitious, aggressive use of home rehab and renovation tools, 59. The down payment assistance program is really fascinating. Targeted again to folks who are at risk or have been displaced, 41%. And perhaps because so much of our area in the study area is already okay with ADUs, that was at the lower end. So anyway, excellent. Let's close the poll. And in a moment, we're gonna send you into groups. My sense is this group is pretty savvy on these issues, just based on these poll results. This issue is #1 issue in the city, so I think you're all dealing with it in some respect. In the breakout groups, we've got 4 questions, and we have 45 minutes to talk about them. So we'll be coming out of the breakout groups about 7:13, if I'm doing my math right. Or actually, no, I'm not doing my math right. About closer to 7:30, we'll be coming out of the breakout groups. So 7:25, bring us out of the breakout groups. And we'll take a little break. And then tonight on the report outs, we did get some feedback that both from some of you who have done the report outs and some who have listened to them, that we just don't want to do a laundry list report out tonight. So when you think about your report outs, think about 3 or 4 things that your group came up with that are highlights. So the report outs tonight will be more about highlights from your discussion as opposed to the whole laundry list. So is there a final question or thought before we send people into the breakout groups? Seeing none, Amanda, let's go. Let's travel.
And owners in the neighborhood. And also we'll end with what other resources can be provided to help residents access wealth building tools.
Great. So I think we'd like to take the bulk of the time on those last 2 questions, but let's start a bit. Particularly for those of you who may not be so close to this issue, did anything stand out to you in the data that we presented? I mean, your neighborhoods have gone through tremendous change, but there's anything that particularly you found overwhelming or underwhelming?
I'll start. I took a photo of it because on my phone, but the overall neighborhoods over 19 years, like the Hispanic population was more than 50% decrease. Like that was just crazy to me. I to see that on paper, I think that was the most shocking.
Well, and I think shocking to those of us who've been in Denver a long time to see these kinds of changes in these
That's
different.
not that long. 19 years is,
Yeah, that's true. That's
right. It was, the stat was near Northwest area total was 71% in 2000 to 35% in 2019. So that was shocking to me.
That is a shocker. Other thoughts or reactions to the data we presented?
I thought it was interesting, the change in household size as well.
Yes.
Basically living in my same house in Sunnyside over that period of time and living in other places, sort of in the same neighborhoods. I mean, I guess I would sort of think that was the case, just given the number of families that have moved out, and then the types of new builds that come in with, really accommodate a smaller size family or smaller resident, but to go, a whole person on average almost. I thought that was kind of surprising.
That's an enormous change.
Yeah.
To go from 2.9 to 2.1 on household size. It's also reflective of of all the demographic changes in the neighborhoods. Okay, not to belabor this question, but is there anything else before we move on to the next question from the data? I think you guys are seeing, those are startling changes in our neighborhoods.
I was kind of curious if Chaffey Park residential areas just didn't exist in the red line map at that point, because it just had Sunnyside. It might have gone like a little bit into Chaffey, but my feeling was that Chaffey must not have existed then or something.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. These red line maps date back to the 1930s. They were sort of Depression era is when they started, and because of federal home loan programs nationally that purposely segregated where the home loans would go. So I suspect that most of Chaffey Park is a lot of it is post World War II in construction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're right. I think it postdates the map, which is pretty interesting in and of itself. All right, let's move on to the next question here, which is, if we do, the whole city's grappling with this right now, right? The whole city's struggling with this. But when you think about your neighborhoods, when you think about the 4 neighborhoods, when you think about the neighborhood you live in, if the affordability issue and the displacement issue is unresolved, whatever that means, if we can't put a dent in these issues, what are the effects on your neighborhoods?
Our schools will be empty or closed.
We'll lose culture, history.
Yeah, loss of culture, history. To Nola's point, one of the most striking statistics we state in our work is the city of San Francisco is in the 100 largest cities in the United States. It is dead last in the per capita number of children now. And that is a direct result of lack of affordability.
Another thing that strikes me, is if you have more renters, you have fewer people who feel they have a stake in the neighborhood. And you frankly, right now, have more people who aren't from there. They've moved in recently. So you lose the ability to have representation where and when it matters. So you end up having things happen that the old timers and others would rather did not happen in the neighborhood, but you have no power to fix it. There's not enough voices.
That's really fascinating, particularly since a lot of your new rental stock is high end. And I'd be curious, actually, Councilwoman, if you're in earshot, do you think your new high-end renters are less engaged than other folks in your council district?
Hi, sorry I don't have my camera on. I'm having unstable internet, so I don't know what's going on. I have found it challenging to engage because I think a lot of them.
We lost her.
I think we lost you, Councilwoman. But I think she's verifying your thought there, Rebecca, that it's harder to engage with some of these, well, particularly the newer rental occupants, even though, so what, they've got higher incomes, but they may be less attached. Any other thoughts on this? And then we'll get into the solutions. Any other thoughts on if left unresolved, what are possible impacts on your neighborhoods? You've come up, go ahead. Yeah, Lexi.
I think if we don't do anything from a land use perspective, every single and I come from it from a different perspective. I'm in real estate, and it's a really tough to be in this industry right now because it's just so depressing. Nobody can find a house that isn't a billionaire. And I think from a land use perspective, I see a lot of blame personally on underlining zoning, because you have developers that say, hey, there's a house, and if I tear it down, I can build 4 townhouses on it. Like it's destroying West Colfax right now, in my opinion. Every house there, unless something happens, it already happened in Sloan's Lake. It happened everywhere possible in other places. And personally, I think it's just a matter of time. And I place a lot of blame on that. I mean, density, yes, but like you're also pushing people out, and you have, I mean, the number of times I look up and see what a house sold for, and then, you know, some off market, and somebody probably knocked on the door with some family or some elderly person, and probably just abused them and paid nothing for their property, and then turned around and made millions on it. It's just, it breaks my heart. And I don't know what the answer is there, but I think like agree with density, but we're not getting, like, we're seeing it's not working, right? You can tear down all the single families and you end up with all these crappy townhouses that honestly, I don't even think will be around in 50 years, because they're being built so cheaply and so, no design, it's really depressing in my opinion. And I mean, I've been here 10, 12 years, and I mean, I moved here from out of state, so I'm not a Denverite, but I also feel like I've been here long enough that I'm not one of the brand new people that showed up yesterday during the pandemic. And it's just, I think it's depressing. And I think land use has a big thing to do with it, because in these popular neighborhoods, developers are flocking here, and they're finding ways to put, 2 units on a place. And I don't know that, there are literally duplexes being sold for $1.5 million, like a half duplex, $1.5 million. And so if you think about that from a developer standpoint, that's $3 million you can sell of units. So you could pay a lot for a piece of land, because like it's just crazy. Like the prices have gotten to a place that's unsustainable for anybody, personally. So I'm just depressed every weekend. So I'm just sharing that. And that's not even like affordable. I mean, people that are making good money can't buy a house. So like, it's a much bigger problem than affordability. I mean, people that are, again, making dual incomes cannot buy a house in this market. So that's,
yeah, no, Lexi, and here in a minute, let's move you from despair to hope in a minute. We'll talk about solutions, but I also, Grace, let's finish that thought on the top section on wondered if Chaffey Park, the thought was wonder if Chaffey Park predated redlining maps, because it didn't show up on the redlining map. So I just want to make sure we captured that thought. All right, guys. So we know we got a dire situation. We know that our neighborhood's evaporating. We know that you got to be a billionaire to buy a house. So let's go to solutions. And some of the sample solutions that we showed you, let's talk more about those. And also if there are other thoughts. And Grace, if you could actually put both boxes on the screen here on this solutions discussion. Now go, there you go. These Google Docs are hard because we're playing tug of war with the other people who are doing this right now. But the 2 solution questions here are: what other policies and programs can be implemented to keep existing renters and owners in the neighborhood? And then also, what other resources can be provided to help residents access wealth building tools? And remember, we gave you samples of those. But let's get some more thoughts here, or let's expand on some of those samplers we gave you.
Am I on? I'm off mute. Yeah. Yep. I wanted to build on Lexi's thought just while we had it, because I feel like density should be allowed with an affordability clause. So I'm developing duplexes right now as part of our land trust. So I know exactly how it works. If you can put 2 units on a lot, they cost less, right? Because you pay less for the land in particular. So I think I don't know if it's what the exact policy is, if it's like one of the units is below 70% AMI or something like that, but that there's use by right, like you can just do a duplex if you're doing affordability, that it's the affordability that's the requirement to get that additional density.
So it sounds like you'd suggest, because there's this new city policy that's looking at projects of 10 units or more, but I'm hearing you suggest that maybe in all scales of development, we should, allow some flex, allow some additional density if affordability is the trade-off. I mean, Nola, am I capturing your thought?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, Lexi, come on, let's get you into an optimistic place.
I'm thinking. I mean, I will say I'm also on the Highland Planning and Development Committee, and we actually had a presentation on affordable housing from the city a couple weeks ago, and there were mixed feelings on it because I think a lot of and there's some developers on the committee. I mean, I think a lot of it feels like, we should put the resources in a place where people who can do it cheaply, like DHA, like versus like requiring developers to build it because if you, like building it in a mass density, it makes everything cheaper. I mean, I don't remember the stat and I don't have my notes, but I want to say it was like still like $500,000 to build an affordable unit or something nuts, like crazy. And so it's like, if you can do it in a way that makes it more affordable versus like pushing it, like our thoughts were like, okay, well, you're going to have a developer that's being forced to put affordable units in his place and they're going to put crappier finishes or something. I mean, it's just more like felt like it wasn't going to come out the same way versus like trying to put the money somewhere where we can give it to DHA and allow them to focus on areas of buying land and competing with, developers and then building like in an affordable way, I guess. That was just something that we talked about as like trying to like, instead of putting it back on a developer, which again, this is outside of our realm because that's already in process, that whole initiative. But that was some of our thoughts, was just kind of like, let's give it to somebody who can have the most impact. Yeah, that's exactly the right way to put it. Like to make the most money out of every dollar. Like at the food bank, like if you give $1, we have all the ways to make it $9 worth of food. Like that's a cool thing that we can do with all of our different programs that we have at the food bank. So like imagine that the same with DHA versus putting them on these individual developers that, I think it solves some of the problem, but is it a long-term thing? I don't know. Is it something that we can sustain?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, is because there are not only DHA, but there are also developers who only build affordable housing, so yeah, do you try to provide more resources or empower them even more to do what they do best?
Exactly.
Well, about the time I was moved to the neighborhood in the 90s, there was a group, which I think Councilwoman Sandoval knows because I think her mom was involved in it, that was set up to really help the then kind of burgeoning Latino community get into houses, do upkeep and repairs. And I think it's some of what we're talking about is good, but you've also got to have existing homeowners be able to maintain their houses. For people who bought something that need some work, have an incentive somehow to have them upgrade, because homes that are kept up are harder to let go to land speculators and developers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So more resources.
Yeah, it was the neighborhood housing service, and she was the executive director, and what she did was combat redlining, but also and helped people get mortgages who traditionally were not able to get mortgages, but then also was able to reinvest in neighborhoods. She's actually helped with the 1986 neighborhood plan for the Highland neighborhood. But what I find interesting in this conversation is on the last poll, the Dura program, you have to qualify with an income qualification. And a lot of people who are midstream, middle class, you can't qualify for preschool program. You don't qualify for the Dura home loans to fix your house up. You don't qualify because you just make enough money to be able to stay within the neighborhood, but you don't qualify for those programs, which is challenging. So I think we need to reevaluate the type of programs for the middle class income who could reinvest and expand on their home, because our homes are really, we have a lot of embodied energy in Northwest Denver in these houses. And I agree, some of the houses that are being built aren't going to last the test of time like a lot of our homes have now, because they're just not being made with the craftsmanship isn't there like it used to be back in the day when we were building things with more sustainable resources. But so I think we need to look at some of the, and it's a bigger conversation than a neighborhood plan, but other policies, and push Dura to reevaluate that income qualification.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I agree with the need for it, or maybe just like a totally different program that's around home repair support.
No.
And I sort of even think
Yeah.
about it, like, I don't know these programs as well as I think, experts in the field know, but
You're fucked.
it also
You're getting
seems,
off.
it also seems like are the
You
programs
should have gone that
targeted
way.
to the
I
type
don't know why you don't have your
low
phone on your head, but
renter
you're-
that needs
you're
affordable
making
housing?
major issues here.
Amanda, could you, or I think that's Amanda, is it?
Councilwoman Sandoval.
Yeah, am I talking over you? Sorry.
She's muted now.
She muted now. We're good.
So I guess what I was trying to say is that, are those programs and policies targeted to different types of existing renters and owners, right? Because seniors aren't going to be able to afford low interest, or aren't going to be interested, not afford, but aren't going to be interested in a low interest home improvement loan, and there's different types, right? There's, like Amanda said, those middle, sort of the middle class income, or the good incomes of working professionals who are artists and musicians and school teachers that we want to keep in the neighborhood, that get priced immediately out of the neighborhood because of their income bracket. Is there targeted programs for those things? I mean, there's obviously low income targeted solutions, but then after you get past low income, you start to run out of solutions for some of those things.
Your question makes me think, and Nola, I'd be curious in your thought on this, because I think you've done this with some success over in GES, but I'm curious whether there would be the opportunity to tailor solutions to this problem to different parts of town, because we sort of have with citywide, and I think, Andrew, part of this is because of the nature of some of the funds you get, you have to, you have citywide distribution, you have citywide policies. But it strikes me that tailoring different solutions for different parts of town based upon what their needs are and what their market is it just strikes me as something that's intriguing. And Garrett, I think that's what you were alluding to. Yeah. I mean, Nola, do you have any thought on that?
I mean, part of that would be doing, we did like a vulnerability to displacement survey across the door-to-door survey across the neighborhood to understand better what the exact needs are. So I think some sort of assessment or survey that would help to determine kind of where are those gaps where there isn't a program or service. And you also want to recognize, like, Dura, if there's a couple things that you don't qualify for Dura, and that if you're undocumented, if you don't have homeowners insurance, there's another one that I can't remember, but there's a couple limitations of that program too, that for I know for GES were big barriers for us. I'm not sure if that's there's probably some of that in these neighborhoods as well, but yeah, I also wanted to mention, and I don't want to take credit for this because it was actually some of the other steering committee members in the conversation that we had that was talking about just overall financial literacy, because for home, for people that have owned a home and maybe have owned a home for a while in the neighborhood, are kind of like, well, I'm gonna sell because it's worth so much right now, you know? And that instead of selling, like, what are your alternatives, and learning more about that. Because I mean, I can say from my own experience, like I get very nervous about risk taking, like with my home, you know, like taking out a loan on my home or things like that. It's like, nah, you know, like you wouldn't want to do that. It just seems, but I think like with additional financial literacy, it's like, well, what are your options? You know, how can you preserve your home for your family and its future generations? And, you know, maybe you rent it for a while, you do these things, but I think a lot of people are nervous about taking that on, and it's just easier to sell. So we were talking about like a don't sell your home, you know, campaign type thing of kind of keep it for your legacy, keep it for your family, and you know, figure out different ways to do, you know your options, I guess. And also just, are there, like Amanda was mentioning, I think investment overall is just so important, not only for people to understand, but for there to be different types of options, like collective investment. You know, can families come together to invest in things, or to you know, help each other out in situations where, oh, we really, you know, if we really want, and this goes back to like maybe the wealth building part of, if we really want local businesses to be supported, could we do a collective investment effort in our neighborhood to fund that, you know, commercial property that we want to see things that we want, instead of, you know, the highest bidder coming in. So just different ways to make those economies happen.
Excellent. We're coming up with some really good ideas, and just a time check. We got about 15 minutes left. I'd kind of like to go down to this last box. There are some ideas that we've touched on above that get into this notion of wealth building, and what wealth building is folks benefiting from equity that they get in their home, or Nola, to your point, in a larger group. You know, this can also happen with businesses, you know, that can acquire commercial property, that type of thing. But how do we create more ownership opportunities? I've heard this in conversations throughout Denver that, you know, the only product that's being built right now are high-end apartments, and there should be other options for people. So any thoughts on this notion of wealth building tools? Also, I'd be curious, the community land trust idea, there we go, 15-minute warning. The community land trust idea, you know, scored really high. I mean, something that's challenging in this area is the availability of land, but why not? I mean, land is just going to be more and more expensive over time. So what are thoughts? Do we have thoughts from you folks on wealth building?
I would say, related to the community land trust, both for the one above and this one, is that in order to get a community land trust going, you have to have land, as you were just saying, and usually very free, very free or very low cost land, or a significant amount of money to purchase that land. So like you can't start a land trust. You know, like you have to have something that is gonna make it roll. And once you get going, it builds its own sustainability, but you really have to have some initial land. So I guess the solution would be, you know, is there a way? I know like Host or Dito have worked on land banking. So like CDBG dollars to purchase like $49.95.
No, could you repeat that term? What did you call it?
Land banking.
Banking. Okay.
So like just having CDBG is community development block grants, federal funds that come down, that, you know, purchasing pieces of land that then can be used for either affordable housing or potentially wealth building or community land trust. So just like getting land and having our public arms initiate those types of purchase. You know, there's other nonprofit organizations that can do land banking too, in addition to, but it was great to see like the city example at 4995 Washington, where they purchased the property and now they're RFPing it for affordable housing and commercial development that's oriented towards what the community wants. So
I'm curious if this group would have any thoughts on the future of the Quig Newton community. Because DHA is going to be going through some planning. It's likely that community is going to change within the term of this plan, 20 years. But this plan will be done before they get into their planning. So in a way, this plan can help inform DHA on both context, how that development fits into Sunnyside, and then what are some of our expectations. So I'm just curious if anyone has any thoughts on Quig.
Yeah.
I do, if I can.
Yeah, please.
As the city is thinking what they're going to do with Quig Newton, we ought to bring the residents of that whole complex together and let them do some of the same stuff we've been doing in our neighborhoods about what would it take to make this a more livable space, more family friendly, safer. I mean, in terms of building, in terms of rehab, in terms of what community resources do we need? And they could even build off of what we're doing here, but because they're a little village all of their own. And giving them the chance to build a better sense of community by helping make the money they've got better.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, they have a real opportunity, and there's two dimensions here. There's the community itself, sort of thinking that through, and then there's how the Sunnyside fabric around connects to and somehow can somehow, maybe there's a shared opportunity there. Maybe there's some opportunity for some affordable housing around, not just on the Quig property itself, but in the surrounding areas as well. Lexi, were you going to offer some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I actually met with the DHA representative and as with the food bank a couple of weeks ago, because we're looking at some options for just if we get kicked out of our space at 38th and Pecos, because we don't have a long-term lease. So that's a big part of our concern right now. And we were thinking it'd be great to partner there because we already do a mobile food bank there. But it sounds like it's definitely 10 plus years out. And I think the interesting thing is there is a space there right now that is available for lease that we're considering. Anyway, but it's interesting looking at it right now is we're not even sure the underlying zoning would allow us to even be there. So, and it does tie back, like I remember being on the Highland neighborhood planning community, like 32nd and Shoshone is a DHA property that wanted to upzone to allow more housing. And it was a big fight. I mean, granted, there were a lot of factors going on, but it could be a way to, in our plan, to set the expectations that it make it a lot easier to rezone whatever they're going to need to do there in the plan itself, to say, hey, we want to allow you to do, because I mean, I think DHA does like the idea of partnering with resources and that are going to be part of the community that, right now there's an awesome new-ish health center right across from this building we looked at on Navajo, and that's amazing. And people were like, oh, wow, they saw the food bank across the street when they were going in there. So it was like nice to know all the services that were available. So I think setting the tone in the plan that we're open to allowing them, whether it's density, whether it's, underlying different uses, commercial, residential, I think could be a good way to set that in place so that it's easier for them to do the redevelopment when it is time.
But the easier to rezone would have to be something that would give preference to community building, community enhancing kind of uses, rather than let someone talk a planning and zoning person into doing it for their next big development.
Sure. Yeah, I guess there'd have to be some sort of deed restriction, of course, on that particular lot, to that it would always be affordable or something, but yeah.
I also think it's important to not create silos of poverty. When those developments were built, we siloed people who usually make the same income and are in the same socioeconomic difficulties. And success comes from being able to have socioeconomic diversity and eclectic neighborhood. Right? That's the neighborhood I grew up in. Is we had tons of different diversity. And so as we think about density for that site, how are we making sure that we're protecting everybody who lives there and giving them a preference to be able to go back there, but also changing the outcomes and adding a different type of maybe AMI and a different type of use. And also that area doesn't, they have super blocks. They don't have alleys. They're not traditional grid, which even silos them even more. So as you're looking at the built environment, making sure that it's equitable. If you go into that area, they don't have trees. They don't have a tree lawn. They don't have as much open space, which usually happens with areas that don't have as much economic status. So making sure that those are all incorporated into the redevelopment.
Yeah, and just to Brad's point before, I think there are other DHA properties like around Quig that are also, you know, I think we should be thinking about the whole area, including other DHA properties and like that whole industrial transition area. That whole thing needs to be thought of comprehensively. And like Amanda's saying, we need people to have pathways out of being in that housing, including home ownership, and that there should be affordable home ownership like pathways, including actual affordable homes that people could move into and stay in the same neighborhood. And so I'm not sure if we've talked about affordable home ownership, but I think that's just such a huge piece that we need. So I would love to see if some sort of redevelopment of DHA could include that, but also just like that transition of industrial could also really have a priority in that, you know, if that's bringing in Habitat or Community Land Trust or
Yeah, I mean, Nola, it really strikes me that's where there could be an opportunity to marry these ideas. You know, you could have DHA doing its thing, and some sort of land trust mechanism could create that opportunity for folks to move into ownership housing, and provide some longevity to it. So it's really interesting what could happen there.
Nola,
Really
could
good.
you repeat what you said about the just because I was catching up a bit? Just want to make sure about maybe a partnership with Habitat. I'm sorry, I think I missed what you said at the end because I was catching up on my notes.
Oh, just for home ownership, Habitat does that, or Community Land Trusts are a good tool to do affordable home ownership.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. I think, to the councilwoman's point, I think DHA has been really attentive in some of their recent development about not siloing people, but it's still been mostly a mixture of rental of rental products, you know, from low income to middle income. The whole home ownership thing, I don't know if they've done much there, and that would be interesting to see how that fits here.
I have a question, Brad.
Yeah, Rebecca.
Talking Habitat, they're in Highland. Their headquarters are in Highland. Why aren't they part of this group?
Good question.
I think Heather lives in Sunnyside also, right?
Yeah, they are part of, by the way, we have a affordable housing sort of resource group of housing experts that will be mobilizing. I know Habitat's part of that. But I think that's a really good point.
Their headquarters is up for sale and they're selling their headquarters in Highland. And Heather lives in the Berkeley neighborhood, but they're actively, I think they might actually even be under contract, their headquarters in their site in Highland, just so you all know.
Okay. Yeah, I love it that used to be a union hall before it was Habitat.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe we should touch in about because somebody will have to report out when we return. And so if you want to, maybe as a group, we could kind of, what stood out to you, just 2 or 3 points that kind of stood out from this conversation. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? And then we could ask for a volunteer.
And we got about 3 minutes. Let's get our
Yeah.
volunteer first. Then we'll, so who?
I have a couple of ones I haven't been able to say yet too.
Okay, well, hold on. Well, then someone really quick, just say, I'll volunteer to speak out, and then Nola, you can bring us to a close.
If the words are on the screen so I can be reminded of what we did, I can present.
Perfect. So Rebecca will be our presenter. And again, you don't need to laundry list it. Just you can point out 4 or 5 points that,
Absolutely, yeah.
that really stuck out. Yeah, Nola, let's close. Let's get some more ideas on there.
So I don't know, we always need new sources of funding to make things happen, right? And I don't know if you all have heard about the transaction fee. Or I don't know if that's the word for it, but it's like a fee for property transition, transactions.
Oh, like a title fee or title transfer.
Yeah, like it goes at and for properties $1 million or more, or $2 million or more, whatever the stat is. They just passed one in Baltimore. And I just think like we have so much wealth coming into these neighborhoods right now. How is there a way to like put that back into the community to preserve it? So I don't know if like that's the exact policy, but some version of that, I mean, it could be area specific, could be citywide, but I just think it's a really important sort of fundraiser.
Excellent. That's idea number 1. You got 40 seconds for idea number 2. Did you have another one, Nola?
Tax relief for affordable projects.
Yes.
Is another big policy area.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. All right, let's leave it there, guys. Really good work from this group. We're going to go back in the big room. I think we're actually going to do a little break and then we'll end. So again, I think we are called Group 1. So Group 1, well done. I think you have the option to leave your room there on the button on the bottom.
Nola, can I make sure I captured your first idea correctly? So you were saying capturing new sources of funding, or capturing the wealth moving into the neighborhood. Was there a specific tool that you mentioned?
Yeah, so it's like in any real estate transaction over a certain amount, it'd be like a $500 fee or something like that would go into a fund for affordable, that would be defined.
So like a fee would go into a fund?
Okay. Yeah, it's like a transaction fee for,
okay.
And it's a lot of times for like international investment that's coming in and things like that. That's what a lot of what they talked about in Baltimore to try and like get some of that money back into the community.
Okay, no, thank you for repeating that. I just wanted to make sure I captured it.
All right, again, thank you all for participating. Grace, thank you so much for taking the note.
We have people trickling in now, right? 12 people in the room. So yeah, feel free to take a quick break and we'll try to resume here at like close to 7:35, or that's 10 minutes. Let's do a little past 7:30, 7:32. Is that good for everybody for a 5-minute break? Okay, great. See you guys then.
Ashton, are you with us from work tonight?
Yes, I am, Rebecca. So let me know if you need a forecast.
Yeah, it jumped up briefly and then went away. A forecast. Yeah, I'm only back one day from spending a month in Mexico, so I'm still getting used to it.
Welcome home.
Yeah, thanks.
That's right. You were down there on our last call, right? A month ago?
I was indeed. So
that's dedication, Rebecca.
We did a variety of meetings from there. It was okay.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Tim. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. And yourself?
Good. Had a nice month away.
Yeah. I was noticing you looked like you were back home. So that's good.
Yep. As of 10 o'clock last night.
Oh.
But no, it's good to be back. Anything new in planning community development?
Oh, let's see. Anything new? I think I've blanked out everything from last week.
Oh. No major conflicts?
Yeah. Not this month. Not this month.
Oh, good.
Leftovers from last month, but
yeah, I get that. But, well, there's always something.
oh yeah. That's what keeps life in Highland interesting.
Yes, no kidding.
We're at 7:32, but I still see a few black boxes. Not sure if people are at their screens right now, but maybe at 7:33 we'll start the report outs. I'm just gonna go down the notes. So the group one, I have Brad and Grace's group, and then group two I have Arlene and Ryan, and then group three Ben and Sung. So we'll go in that order if that is okay.
Great. And Rebecca is our spokesperson, and she's gonna pluck out 4 or 5 pearls of wisdom from our group. We had a great spirited discussion.
Can we get our words up there so people can see what I'm talking about?
Could someone share the Google Doc? Yeah, sorry. I think maybe that's what we need.
Yeah.
I could share it, but I didn't know if that made the most sense. I can do that. There you go, Rebecca. Can you see that?
Yep.
Make sure I'm on us. Yeah, sorry.
Yep, you're on us. The first thing that we talked about was affordability and displacement. And most of us were startled at the high level of loss in about 15 years in our Hispano-Latinx community. That was, it's concerning, I guess. There's also a change in household size. What issues of affordability and displacement, if they're unresolved, what would be happening? Certainly we would lose owners, families, schools might have to close for lack of funding and for lack of students, loss of culture and history. We worry about having fewer people who see themselves as stakeholders, who can be part of helping moderate change. And, we feel like we're pushing people out and that shouldn't be happening. Okay, on to the next bit here. This was our big one. This was policies and programs can be implemented to keep existing renters and owners. One slightly new and challenging thing was having an affordability clause that developers have to sign, that they have to be sure that we have affordable housing. Being in partnership with Dura, DHA, and other groups to make not only funding available, especially for lower and middle income people who couldn't otherwise afford to get into some of these, make that available. But also, and this was a really important one that part of our group came up with, do financial literacy so people can make reasoned decisions if they're thinking about selling, about whether selling is the right thing. And we had some very specifics on that. What other resources can be provided to help residents access wealth building tools? Again, we're talking a lot about partnerships. We talked extensively about how, what could be the future of Quig Newton, because that's a central part of Chaffey Park, and I don't know if it's also partly on the top of Sunnyside, but one suggestion was giving the people who live there, like we're able to do in our neighborhoods now, more say in what would, as they're redeveloping, what they're doing with it, make it more livable in the long run. Working with Habitat for Humanity and community land trusts to allow for people to get into good quality, lower income houses that they could find ways to actually afford. And again, needing funding. One recommendation was X number of dollars from each real estate transaction would come from a fee and would go into the community to capture wealth moving into the area. And then, of course, tax relief for affordable projects. You there? Is that it? Okay.
Thanks, Rebecca.
So yeah, our group also had a very spirited discussion. So thank you, everyone. We also had a great chat discussion as well. But Emily is going to represent our group and pick out the key points.
Cool. So we actually covered a lot of similar in the top two boxes, what Rebecca's group talked about, just kind of the decrease in, which we all know if we live here and have lived here any amount of time at all, seeing that massive decrease of the Chicano Latinx population. Lorenzo was able to give great context for like knowing neighbors who've moved, why they've moved, the reasons behind that. But also sort of this double, I don't know the right way to say it, but like the neighborhood has changed so much, it's hard for people to feel incentivized to stay or to come back. Yet also like, I think for people who want to stay, it's unaffordable and they're unable to stay because of rising costs for lots of reasons. So it's sort of like, what's the push and what's the pull was one of the things that I sort of thought about as we were, because the neighborhood's already changed. What does it look like to bring people back? Do they want that? Are they leaving because it's different? They don't. Lorenzo mentioned someone not feeling like it was their home anymore, even though they lived here longer than any of the people who made them feel that way. Let's see, then some of the issues that brings up is the loss of culture identity, a loss of space, a loss of connection, the things that were valued before in the community are now different, changing, from restaurants to stores to places to hang out, things to do. There's a link for Tim's Latinos in Action or Latino leadership class for a book they all made about poems they wrote about the neighborhood, photos they took of their neighborhood. It's really great. You should all check it out. It's cool. And brings the student voice. Like, I don't think we really look at what youth are experiencing and encountering in these conversations sometimes. So having that, making sure that we're attentive to that. So in terms of policies, we looked at, again, pretty similar to what Rebecca had talked about, caps on taxes for long-term homeowners, education around, what you can do with a house that's greatly appreciating, how you can pass that on, land trust. I had brought up zoning, could we upzone? And then Renee kind of backed that up, as well as with some comments Lorenzo made about, if you can build a 400 square foot scrape of a home, why can't you put 3 stacked 1,300 square feet units in, so that increases our density, but also allows for people to stay in place, because you're like creating more affordability ideally. A demolition tax or a penalty for an older family home. If you're taking out an older family home and you're scraping it to put something huge and that costs a lot of money, is there a tax on that? Is there disincentivizing? Are there disincentives to kind of cover those things? Let me think. We did talk about a reason people might sell or move is because they can't afford the upkeep of a home anymore. Construction is so costly. So could we do things that could connect, like to Dura and other things, to keep older homeowners in their homes and maintaining their homes the way they need to? And then the last one was disincentivizing out of state or, owners of properties that are companies that are just buying them to rent them and running up prices for current homeowners and renters. And then last things we looked at were homeowning counselors. So could we have a model where there's a brick and mortar place that someone could go to get advising that's culturally appropriate, that recognizes the displacement and harm that's happened over the years in our neighborhood, that allows people to utilize the equity of their home? That brought us into like land trust. So Renee brought up the example of the Elevation Community Land Trust, where people can stay in place and utilize the equity of their home to increase the value of their home, but they're using it for themselves. I think that's a paraphrase, I could be wrong. I mentioned too that I have a lot of students at the high school I work at, which is down south, but is a DPS school, who are interested in construction. We have a lot of people who need construction. Is there a way to connect the needs of neighborhoods and residents with the desires of students going into apprenticeships through the city? And there's like those programs exist, but I just don't know if the connections are always there between the people who need the services and the people who want to provide it. That could be a way to keep like youth at North High School engaged in this community, or maybe even bring them back. We talked a lot about North prioritizing families who are traditionally displaced. So North actually more represents the North Side than it does Highlands and Sunnyside and Chaffey Park. The demographics of North look more like these communities did 15, 20 years ago than it does what they look like right now. And I think that was intentional by the principal, by the school, by who they allowed a choice in, priority given. We talked about prioritization of things as well. Sorry, I kind of laundry listed, which I wasn't supposed to do, but best bet.
Thanks for volunteering. So then we're going to move on to Ben and Sung's group.
And Trupti is going to summarize the key takeaways from our discussion, which was very lively and thoughtful.
Thank you. Yeah, so a lot of repeating themes, right? Obviously, the wholesale movement and loss of family and culture and the multicultural backgrounds. We're worried about the school impact on schools with the smaller size families and what that would mean, although later on we kind of talk about that could be a potential too, but the issue of school closures, because it's much harder to then build a school when we need it. Affordability, obviously seeing that homes were about $100,000, are now 600 over the last, 15, 20 years. And it only goes up to 2020, and we know percentages went up way in the last 2 years. Could we look at, let's see, can we look at a mix of, can we build intentionally with mix of rentals and for purchase, as well as different size homes to accommodate, different size families? So not everything needs to be, 3,000 square feet, maybe we need a lot of 3.2s, but also just making sure that any area that is going to see a lot of density, that we have a mix of for rent and for purchase because it's sustainable. We got into conversation a little bit about short-term rental. Tim brought up that there is a development where there's small units, and even the developer is marketing them as, you know, buy these and rent them out. And so our group kind of went a little bit into short-term rental issues. And the thought was, could we, you know, could the city, this is a policy piece, you know, permit or put a cap on the number of licenses within a geographic area, so it would still allow to, you know, enough units, but also just cap it so that, you know, there's a bit more predictability for folks who are looking to rent. Let's see, we got that. Okay, on a different, you know, we looked at the no net loss piece, and I was looking specifically for Sunnyside, where that policy may not work in Sunnyside as much, especially because we have light industrial turning into a high density. So you could argue that there's no loss in affordability there in a sense. There could be some losses of jobs, but not a loss in affordable housing. So, you know, maybe we need different tools for different areas depending on the type of potential for development that exists. Other areas that are built out much more than we are. Rent subsidies and incentives are short term. They can be done quick. They're the most tactical. My thought was that we just didn't see enough tools, you know, to address all these things. You know, so kind of looking into some of the kind of policy things, you know, besides the rental and ownership mix, size of homes, you know, different non-traditional things, such as what happened at Johnson and Wales, right? Can the city build on public land and use public land for different reasons? I mean, it could be malls, it could be hotels. I mean, I think we've seen some of these as well, but kind of looking for those opportunities where we could, and not sell that to market rate developers, but actually the city build. Let's see, ADUs, we talked a little bit about ADUs and the fact that there are a lot of areas that allow ADUs, and a majority of, you know, the districts that we're talking about have access to ADUs, but they're not getting built. So, you know, what can the city do to make it easier to either, you know, obviously permitting and that licensing cost is one thing, but these ADUs can be expensive and they're kind of cost prohibitive. So how could the city help? Can the city, you know, work with manufacturers or such to have some pre-approved plans, but ways to make it more affordable and maybe negotiate volume discounts or something.
Trifty, if I could get you just to do maybe one more point so we make sure we have time for.
Sure.
Are you the last group? Maybe. Oh no, you're the last
group. Yeah.
Sorry. A couple more points.
Let's see. And then the big thing we talked about was also like how to limit corporate investment. How do we discourage buyers like corporate and investment buyers who are pricing out folks, you know, coming in with deep pockets, cash offers. So what can the city do? What kind of tools can we use? And also expanding low-income housing tax credits, possibly as another tool. Did I cover that all? I hope I did.
You did great, Tripti.
Thanks.
Thank you for all the volunteers. We really appreciate you sharing with the group. It's great to hear kind of all the ideas that went around, and it sounds like people have a lot of knowledge in this area. So it's really great hearing from everyone. So I'm going to apologize if you hear my dog bark. I have a puppy, so she's barking. She's not happy about being alone right now. So can you guys, so first we just wanted to ask you about like the format that we use today. First we'll ask you what went well. Did you guys feel anything went well? I know last time we had heard you wanted materials in advance, so we sent those out earlier, and that was good feedback to hear. So like anything else like that you know you feel things that went well or things that you would change?
Well, something that was really good this time and last time, and at the design and preservation meeting I went to last week, is how productive these small group meetings are. Easier for people to talk in a small group, but also, it's really startling how much on the same page we're becoming.
Thank you for sharing that. So hearing that small groups are effective. Troop D, I think you have your hand raised. Troop D, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I apologize. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. I was thinking about something else, but I think Rebecca's last point of how similar we are in kind of where we're coming up with, I guess I would challenge and say, let's make sure that's because we're as a community, or that we're representative of the community, and that we're not a vocal, minority, majority here, where folks of similar backgrounds are on the conversation. So therefore we have similar thoughts and perspectives. So, I don't know. In that situation, I always feel like there just is not enough engagement, and the folks who engage are the folks who engage all the time. And, so it's always our voices, the voices I'm hearing now are the voices I always hear from, because it's the same smaller group of people who either have time or energy and commitment, interest, whatever it is, but we tend to be the same small group. So I would challenge it a little bit and say, are we just a little too insular? Do we, we just not reaching out to some of the other folks? Like, actually, here's the question I had about what's going on with the promoters. I had asked, the promotoras, but is there an update on like what are they doing? What have they done? Are they bringing in people that could be participating in here whose voices may be ones that we are missing?
No, that's a good suggestion. Does this consulting team or have an update on that?
Yeah, I can provide a quick update, and then maybe we can bring Carlos in again to the next meeting, provide you more of a detailed update. They are focused on the neighborhood workshops where we're going to have folks in person, not so much these online workshops. So they're focused on promoting the neighborhood workshops. There's also, if you remember on the calendar, we're going to have Spanish language roundtables as well that parallel the neighborhood workshops. So that's their primary focus at this point. They are also they've been stationing at different places where like Save-A-Lot and some other places in the community that appear to have just a variety of folks going to different destinations at different times. So they're active, they're out there, they are focused more on the in-person though than the virtual. And again, we can have Carlos or Mary Cruz provide an update the next meeting.
Thank you. I was curious about where that was.
Yeah.
No, thanks. And thanks that we should have in our consciousness who's not maybe represented when we're having these discussions. And then Leslie, I saw you had your hand raised too. Did you have some feedback about the process tonight?
Well, my big question was this, and it may or may not be able to be answered right now. But when we passed the earlier blueprint of 2001, we weren't allowed to require affordable housing. And it's my understanding now that Annalise, Hawk, and others have an affordable housing plan. And so when we pass this near Northwest plan, is Annalise's affordable housing plan the next policy document that would enable stuff like this? Or is there room in this plan to have other policies built to get this plan into action?
Yeah, I can take that one. So the project that you're referring to is regulatory nature, meaning that they changed the rules of how we do development in Denver. So once that's adopted by city council, it'll have direct impacts on the actual development happening on the ground today. From an NPI standpoint, from a neighborhood planning, it's really intended to, one, understand the values of the community, structure it in a policy language so that we provide future direction on how we move forward as a community to fulfill the objectives of how we generate more affordable housing in the neighborhood, how we promote better design. So it's really the foundation for additional follow-up implementation projects to really achieve the goals that we're all talking about today. So all the conversations were about different policy ideas. Once that's baked into the plan, then it allows us as staff to take that on and actually make that happen. So hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Sung. Do we have any more feedback about the process before I kind of move on to just kind of updates on what's coming up next?
Can we meet in person next time? Or could those that want to meet in person, do a hybrid?
I will run that by the group and see what our kind of policy is from a city perspective in our department on meetings. I think generally like hybrid meetings have been harder to conduct, but going back to in person, I think that's a question I just need to ask and see what that looks like. But if that's also a question maybe for the group to see how if that's an option they want to explore as well. So I'll try to run that by my supervisor and team and see what that looks like.
Thanks. And Troop D and Leslie, are your hands just up from before?
Yeah. Yes, mine's up from before. Okay. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, it's fine. Just wanted to check.
I've got a last comment.
Okay.
So regarding this particular topic today on affordable housing, on this one, I wish we had, and maybe we did, and I apologize if I didn't recognize this, but having some more knowledgeable folks with things that are happening around the country and more options of policies, because I feel like I'm not, an expert in this area, and I'm reacting to the 4 you put, or 8 that are on paper, but that's to me is limiting. In the topic like that, I wish we had folks, movers and shakers in the country who are solving problems or have solved problems to kind of share how they did some of that. So I just felt like this is a little bit more difficult for me, not in a policy space.
Oh, thank you, Troop T, for sharing that feedback. We only have a couple minutes left, so I'll just kind of run through what's coming up next. So just wanting to let you know what's coming up for the steering committee meeting. So our April 26th meeting is going to focus on complete and green streets. And then our May meeting will discuss industrial future design, character, and preservation. Next slide. And so hopefully you all in the beginning of the month received the email about the topic roundtable. So our last one is actually tomorrow. And it focuses on this topic of affordable housing and wealth building, and that's a virtual roundtable, and it's open to the public. So if you want to help us get the word out, anybody you think would be good, to attend, try to recruit some folks to come. And then next slide. And a lot of you guys have already volunteered for this, but if you could help us get out flyers and yard signs, we can deliver those to you. So just you can let us know now in the chat if you're interested in that, or contact Sung via email to let us know if that's something you would like to do. And just so kind of on the flyer just kind of says, so end of April, beginning of May, we're going to be doing the neighborhood roundtable. So those will be the virtual. And then we're also going to be doing the in-person workshops and those will be kind of more neighborhood issues focused. And then next slide. So yeah, just look out for information coming for the next steering committee meeting, and yeah, help us spread the word. And if you haven't already, please read the issues and opportunities summary.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for attending and having these great conversations. And just always thankful for your time and commitment to this project. And I'm sure the community as well. So I will see you guys next month for a similar format and set of robust discussions. Any questions or? Okay. So with that, I'll say goodbye. And Amanda, I think you're the host, so you'll probably and
Thanks,
kick us all
everyone.
out.
Thank you all.